Says my name is Yomi. Can I add it real quick?
Yeah.
Your texture was good.
Tell us right now because it's starting. Yeah.
My mom. No, Gertner. Danny Gertner from Bas Yitzchak Michal.
From Bas Yitzchak Michal. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Don't thank you. Don't be sorry. Sus. All right, Shabbat. Good morning. Good morning. A great instruction to continue Masechas. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Haba Alim Latova, Ushi and Mindy Schreiber, and the Schos of Refush Lima, for Elio Rafael Ben Miriam. Matin Chanalea Margalit, in memory of Mati's father, Yosef Shlomo Moshe Shmuel Ben Yekusu Yehuda. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Milton Melanie Gertner, in memory of Ramilt's mother from Bas Yitzchak Michal, Fanny Gertner. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Sav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all those who made a refuah Stefan together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, and Halavai, we should be Zochim Meretz Hashem to continue Besoros Tavos for all of Am Yisrael. But so with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, a really exciting daf ahead of us. Today's daf is Kuf Aleph. 101. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Kuf on the base 100b, and we left off Amruha Kameh, right? Was it 5 lines up? 2, 4, perfect. Yeah, I remember the words. I just don't remember where it was. Right? Good. So 5 lines on the bottom. Amruha Kameh. So just remember again, we're in the midst of the really fascinating discussion regarding Aninos, and specifically, again, the impact of Aninos on Karban Pesach, the impact of Aninos ultimately, again, on the following night. And also remember, again, in the world of Aninos, really 4 different stages of Aninos. Aninos of the day of death, Aninos of the night following the day of death, Aninos of the day of burial, and Aninos following the day of burial. So the Gemara says, Amruah Kameh, the Rava. So they said over the previous exchange in front of Rava. So the Gemara says, "Midikama Rabbi Yom Kavura Tofes Leila Midirabanan." So the fact that we said before that the day of death, right? So remember, there's Aninos on the day of burial, and the night following the burial is also in a state of Aninos Midirabanan. Mechlal Diyomisa Tofes Leila Midaraisa. We could infer from that statement that on the day of death, where everyone agrees that there is Aninos, that the night following the day of death has Aninos Mida'araisa. The Sav Rabbi Aninos Laila, is that true? That Rabbi actually holds that Halacha Lamaisa, Aninos Laila. So remember again, when we say Aninos Laila, that means the night following the day of death. Are we saying that the night, now by the way, how we know that Aninos is Daraisa on the day of death, we haven't even established it. That's when it gets out in today's daf. But does Rabbi actually hold that Aninos that follows the day of death is actually the Araisa? Vatanya, we learned, Hein Hayom, Ani Hayom Asar, Velayla Mutter. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, now we're going to get into it. This is the pasuk by Nadav and Avihu in Parashas Shmini, where remember again, on the day of the consecration of the Mishkan, an overwhelming tragedy occurs, and Aaron's 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu, are killed. Again, they die as a result, again, whatever the nature of their particular Avera was. So, as we're going to get into in just a little bit, that Moshe Rabbeinu confronts Aaron about burning certain karbanos and not eating certain karbanos. So Aaron essentially says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Vayidaber Aaron al Moshe, hein hayom ekrivi eschat asam ves olasam lefnei Hashem v'atikreno si ka'ela." So Aaron essentially says to Moshe, these events occurred to me today. How could I be able to go ahead and actually partake of the karban? Now, the events that Aaron is referring to, good, as the death of Nadav and Avihu. So Aaron was in a state of Aninos when he was having this conversation with Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says, Hein hayom, ani hayom asar, Balayla mutter. So Aaron was saying to Moshe, today, in other words, right now, I'm in a state of Aninos, and therefore, as a result of that state of Aninos, I am not permitted to partake of these karbanos. Uladoros, but in future generations, bein bayom u bein balayla also div Rabbi Yehuda. This was unique for Aaron, but in future generations, ultimately, again, the aninos would extend both by day and by night. Rabbi Huda, Rabbi says, aninos laila eina medivrei Torah el medivrei sovrim. Rabbi says, no. Daytime aninos is the oraisa, but nighttime aninos, meaning the night following the day of death, that is only drabanan. To which the Gemara says, the olam drabanani. In reality, you're correct. In reality, the night following the day of death is aninos midrabanan. Top of Kof Aleph, we'll say 101a. The chachamim asu chizuk l'divreihem yoser mishal Torah. But Allah Chalamayis again, the chachamim went ahead and bolstered their words. Ultimately, again, more than divrei Torah itself. In other words, Abosai. So this is actually quite interesting. It's actually quite interesting that we see this a number of times in halacha, that sometimes when chachamim legislate law, they legislate sometimes not only that their law should mirror biblical law, but sometimes in fact should even be stronger than biblical law. Incredible. The Gemara says, Tana Abanas. Well, so we're still not finished. What is the status ultimately again of Aninis? But now we're going to get into it. Tana Abanan. Kikain tsuvesi, kasher tzivesi, kasher tziva Hashem. So remember, so all the halachos of aninos, as we know, the concept of aninos is learned out from the death of Nadav and Avihu. Right? It's this episode that ultimately conveys to us all of these halachos. So the Gemara says, when you look at the lashonos of the psukim, there are three different phrases of what we'll call tziva, or an instruction. Kikain tsuvesi, this is what I was commanded. Kasher tzivisi, as I was commanded. And kasher tziva Hashem, as Hashem commanded. Okay, what does this mean? Kikain tsuvesi, ba'aninos yochluhu. So ultimately, the first thing that Moshe Rabbeinu says to Aaron is, I was commanded to instruct you that Aaron, you are to eat your karbanos even in a state of aninos. Now remember again, Abosai. So that which applies to Aaron may or may not apply to other people, right? Because halacha l'maisa, Aaron is the Kohen Gadol. So what works for Aaron, like I said, may or may not work for others. But even the Gemara says, Kikain tzivesi, ba'aninos yochlu. So number one, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Aaron, you are to go ahead and eat karbanos even in a state of aninos, kasher tzivisi, as I commanded you, b'shas ma'isa amar lahem. Moshe Rabbeinu was giving this over literally again b'shas ma'isa. B'shas ma'isa means in the midst of Aaron's aninos. Look at Rashi for just a moment. B'shas ma'isa, the last wide line. Kishe'ira lahem aninusam. When Aaron literally again became an onein, Amar lahem shelo yimnu me'achilas kodshim hayom. He was telling them, do not abstain. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Aaron, do not abstain from eating kodshim. Sheshon pi hagvura shechaluk haninos hayom bekodshim misha'ar yamim ukishash nisrafa. Amar lahem achol tochlu osa hayal lahem laochla kasher tzivisi eschem b'shas ma'isa. So when Nadav and Avihu died, and Aaron and his sons, his two remaining sons, Elazar and Itamar, were in a state of aninos, Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, Chevra, you are to eat the karbanos. You are to offer up the karbanos and to eat the karbanos. I'm going to say, we're going to get into this in just a little bit. We're going to see there are three karbanos offered up on that day. We're going to see that some of them were burnt, totally burnt, some of them were consumed, which we'll discuss. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when he sees that some of the karbanos were burnt, he confronts Aaron and he says, why did you do this? I instructed you to eat all of the karbanos today. Okay, Amar lahem. So now we're going to go through the exchange between Moshe and Aaron. Amar lahem, kasher tziva Hashem. So first of all, Moshe says to Aaron, I'm instructing you to go ahead and consume your karbanos. Even, so there's two pieces. Number one, to do the avoda. Number two, to consume the karbanos, even in a state of aninos. So the first thing that Moshe says to Aaron is, please understand, this is not my opinion. What I'm conveying to you comes to me from the Ribono Shel Olam. Lo me'elai ani omer. I'm not saying this of my own volition, but rather, again, I'm giving this over to you from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Gemara says, Ramini, Marais the Kasha, Mipnei Aninos Nisrafa. Shabbos says, this is very interesting. So remember, we're going to see that there were a couple of different karbanos, as we will get into. The carbon that Aaron burnt, that he did not consume, was the chatos of Rosh Chodesh. Right, it was chatos of Rosh Chodesh. Because remember again, all of this takes place on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So every Rosh Chodesh there is a carbon chatos. The carbon that Aaron decided not decided, we'll see why. The carbon that Aaron did not eat, but rather burnt on the Mizbeach was the chatos of Rosh Chodesh. Why did he do this? So the Gemara says, Mipnei aninos nisrafa. He burnt it because he felt that he would not felt, because he was in a state of aninos. He felt it was important to go ahead and burn it. Lekach ne'emar ka'ela. Therefore, the pasuk says like this. In other words, we'll say ka'ela means Aaron was saying, these things happened to me. How could I consume the carbon? All right, the story is going to come together in just a little bit. Amar Shmuel, Lokashia, ha Rabbi Huda, ha Rabbi Nasan. The Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Huda, whereas ultimately, again, the other brayso reflects the view of Rabbi Nechemia. The Sanya, Mipnei Aninos Sarfuha. Aaron did not go ahead and eat, or did not go ahead and eat the chatas of Rosh Chodesh. He burnt it because of Aninos. Lekach ne'emar, Keila de Rabbi Nechemia. So Rabbi Nechemia is of the opinion, the reason that Aaron did not eat the chatas of Rosh Chodesh was because he was in a state of aninos. The Gemara says, Rabbi Huda, Shimon say, Mipnei tuma nisrafa. No, it wasn't because of aninos. Why did he burn the chatas of Rosh Chodesh and not eat it? Because the carbon became tameh. That's why he went ahead and he burnt it. So the Gemara says, Shema ta'omer me'aninos nisrafa, because if you say that Aaron burnt the chatas of Rosh Chodesh because of aninos, hayu l'shloshtan she yisrafuha. Then what? Then I will say he should have burnt all of the karbanos. As we're going to see, he offered up 3 karbanos. The only one he burnt was the chatas of Rosh Chodesh. The other 2 he consumed. So what's the pshat? What's the pshat? If it's a din, ultimately, we'll say Kuf Aleph Mandalef 101a, about 10 lines down from the top. So we'll say, so again, if halacha l'maisa, it was a din in aninos, then at the end of the day he should have gone ahead and burnt all of them. Why would he just burn the chatas of Rosh Chodesh? It must be that what happened, the chatas of Rosh Chodesh became tameh. That's why halacha l'maisi went ahead and he burnt it. Okay, the Gemara says as follows. Davar akar, other possibility, hayurai la'ochalon la'erev. They could have gone ahead, and we'll say, even if you hold that they couldn't consume it because of aninos, at most aninos lasts for the day of death. They could have gone ahead and waited and consumed it that night. Davar achar, another possibility is, Valo Pinchas haya imahen. They weren't the only Kohanim. Pinchas was also there. And even if Aaron, Elazar, and Itamar could not consume the karbanos because of aninos, Pinchas was present, and Pinchas could have gone ahead and consumed the karbanos instead. Now before we go on, take a quick look at Rashi for just a moment. You see Rashi Mipnei Tuma Nisrafa. So it's about midway down in the short lines. So this is important, Rashi. Rashi Mipnei Tuma Nisrafa. Shenaga Batuma Bechata Shasi Rosh Chodesh. Sekarva Bobayom Shokam Mishkam Rosh Chodesh Nisan Vehu Haya Shmini Lemilum. So both say. So remember again. Let's go through the facts that we know over here, right? So Rashi, first of all, just read it a little bit further in Rashi. Rashi says, Shlosha Sirim Kirvu Bo Bayom. There were 3 karbanos that were brought that day. So remember again, what's the day we're talking about? The day of the consecration of the Mishkan, right? Remember again, Bayom HaShmini, on the 8th day, Moshe Rabbeinu consecrates for the first 7 days. The 8th day, number 8, which is the primary consecration day, Aaron and his sons take over. That day was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rashi points out there were 3 goats, 3 seirim that were offered up that day. Number 1, Seir Nachshon. Now, say, what's Seir Nachshon? Remember again, the days of the consecration, there was a different Nasi, a different tribal prince, who offered up his carbon that day. That was the day of Nachshon ben Aminadav. Okay, so number 1 is Seir Nachshon. Number 2 was Seir Rosh Chodesh. And number 3 was Seir Sheba L'Sha'ah. Was a special Seir, a special offering to mark the consecration of the Mishkan. So these are the 3 offerings. Again, Seir of Nachshon ben Aminadav, Seir of Rosh Chodesh, and a special inaugural Seir. Okay, these are all facts that everyone agrees on. What else is a fact? Aaron burnt the Seir of Rosh Chodesh. They consumed the other 2. So I will say, now what are we trying to figure out? Aaron, why did you burn the Seir of Rosh Chodesh and not consume it? Okay, this is a machlokes. Rabbi Nechemia says he didn't consume the Seir of Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because he was an onein. Why was he an onain? Because his sons Nadav and Avihu died. That's Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's not because of aninos. Because if it was because of aninos, then what? Then he should have burnt all of the karbanos and not consumed any of them. So why did he only burn one and consume the other two? It must be because the Siyar Rosh Chodesh became Tameh. Tuma. That's what happened over here. So we'll say, so that's our machlokes. That's our machlokes. So the Gemara says, listen, Rava Amrava says, no. Idi v'idi Rabbi Nechemiah. Both of these sources reflect the view of Rabbi Nechemiah. The Gemara says, kasha, there's no contradiction. Kan bekadshe shah, kan bekadshe doros. Oh, so we'll say, now watch this. Really, both opinions reflect the view of Rabbi Nechemiah. Now we'll say, now remember again, what does Rabbi Nechemiah hold? Rabbi Nechemiah holds that the reason why Aaron burnt the Siyar Rosh Chodesh was because of aninos. But remember again, we asked, if it's because of aninos, then what? If it's because of aninos, then halacha l'maisa again. If it's because of aninos, then halacha l'maisa. If it's because of aninos, then why didn't he burn all of them? So Rabbi says, so this is very interesting. Rabbi gives a very interesting answer. Rabbi says there's a distinction between what we call kadshe shah versus kadshe doros. Kadshe shah refer to those karbanos which are unique for now, versus kadshe doros, which are ongoing sacrifices. So watch this. For example, in these three, Siyar Rosh Chodesh is what we call kadshe doros, because that carbon will be offered in Meretz Hashem for all future generations. Versus the Siyar of Nachshon ben Aminadav and the special inaugural Siyar, those are kadshe shah. Rava wants to suggest like this: aninos only impacted kadshe doros. It doesn't impact kadshe shah. Therefore, again, I did not eat the Siyar Rosh Chodesh because that was kadshe doros. That was ongoing carbon. But he did eat the unique karbanos for this time right now, which was the Siyar of Nachshon ben Aminadav and the inaugural Siyar. Very interesting. Rabbi Nechemiah, heichi mitaretz lahanikra, v'Rabbanan heichi mitaretz lahanikra. So Rabbi says, so now the Gemara is going to ask, how do both Rabbi Nechemiah and the Rabbanan interpret the above mentioned verses? So Rabbi say, here we go. Now we're going to actually go through the entire exchange, ultimately again between Moshe and Aaron. So watch this. Rabbi Nechemiah, mitaretz luhachi. So Nechemiah reads it like this: Madua lo achaltem. So Moshe Rabbeinu confronts Aaron, because also remember again what happened over here. They did not eat the Siyar Rosh Chodesh. Aaron burnt the Siyar Rosh Chodesh. So the first thing that happens over here is that Moshe Rabbeinu confronts Aaron. Why did you not eat the Siyar Rosh Chodesh? Amar lo Moshe la Aaron. So Moshe says to Aaron, Shema nichnas dama lifnai v'lifnim. Maybe you made a mistake, and maybe you ended up bringing the blood of the Seir inside of the Kodesh. Right? Now again, Rabbi, remember again, we've seen this before. What happens when you bring a chatos achitzon inside, the blood of an outer chatos inside of the Beis HaMikdash or inside of the Mishkan? It disqualifies it. So Rabbi says, here's what's happening over here. Aaron burnt the Seir of Rosh Chodesh instead of eating it. Moshe Rabbeinu confronts him and asks him, why did you do this? Why did you do this? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, maybe did you make a mistake and accidentally bring the blood inside? Is that what happened? Amar lo, he said, no. Hein lo huva es dama. Aaron says, no, I didn't bring the blood inside. Okay. Moshe says, Shema chutz lemechitzasa yatzasa. Did you maybe take the blood outside of the confines of the Beis HaMikdash? Amar lo, b'kodesh haisa. No, Aaron says, no, we're good. I did not take the blood outside. V'dilma ba'aninos akrivusa upaslasua. Did you maybe offer it up in a state of aninos and thereby disqualify it like that? Amar la Moshe. So Aaron says to Moshe, V'chi hein hekrivu. Do you think my sons offered this up? Ani hekrafti. Ultimately, again, I offered it up. And I will say, what does that mean? I offered it up. And Aaron's saying, for me, I offered it up. I'm sorry, Ani crafty. So I offered it up, meaning Aaron saying, I'm the Kohen Gadol, and I, the Kohen Gadol, offered up in a state of aninos, right? I just want to point out something amazing. What is the shot that the Kohen Gadol offers up? The Kohen Gadol continues his avoda in a state of aninos. Like, what's the pshat with that? I will say, think about this in just a moment, right? Kohen Gadol offers up in a state of aninos. What's the pshat? What's the pshat? So I will say, there's a tremendous Musar Haskell. The tremendous Musar Haskell is that sometimes in life, we have things that have to get done, and you can't let anything get in your way. There are certain missions that are so important, so holy, and so sacred that there are no excuses. There are absolutely no excuses. And I both say, this is a tremendous yesod, because a lot of times in life, we take on certain responsibilities, whether it's with our learning, whether it's with our avoda, whether it's with our family, our tzedakah, and then whatever it is, you fill in the blank. And then like it gets difficult. I don't know, I get tired, it's inconvenient. And we allow ourselves to make excuses for non-performance. There's no lack of excuses in this world for why you can't accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. The shaila just is, are you committed enough to work past the excuses? Are you committed enough to push through? The Kohen Gadol represents a model where a person is so dedicated to the actualization of a spiritual goal that nothing gets in the middle. Now, the Kohen Gadol represents almost like an exaggerated example of this, because the Kohen Gadol is a standard that we are not held to. Aaron's children died. What does Aaron do in the aftermath of the death of his children? What does he do? He pushes forward. There are no excuses. There are no roadblocks. There is nothing that stands in my way from accomplishing the things I need to accomplish in life. Now, again, this is a different standard. And we are not held to the standard of the Kohen Gadol. But we do have to create our own standards. What are the things in your life? What are the things in our lives that ultimately, again, have to get done? And if I have to get them done and they're important enough that they are goals in my life, then I have to be committed to not making excuses for non-performance. It's not everything in life, but what are the core things in my life that have to get done? And once I decide those things, you got to pull out the stops. You got to pull out the excuses. You have to pull out all of the impediments and be singularly devoted to the actualization of those goals. Such a tremendous idea. For Amrlay, so what happens? Now Moshe Rabbeinu says, okay, Aaron, so let me get this straight. Right? So now Aaron, I understand. If the blood was not accidentally taken inside the mikdash, and it wasn't accidentally taken outside of the mikdash, so ultimately Moshe says to Aaron, I understand, so why didn't you eat the seer of Rosh Chodesh? Why did you burn it? So Moshe Rabbeinu, we'll say, it's actually quite beautiful also. Moshe Rabbeinu sees that his brother did something that is inappropriate, or in his mind is inappropriate. If you notice, what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't rush to judgment. Instead, Moshe Rabbeinu has a conversation. Aaron, I don't understand what you did, because I don't understand why you burnt the seer of Rosh Chodesh. You should have eaten it. Did you take the blood inside the mikdash? No, I didn't do that. Did you take the blood outside the mikdash? No, I didn't do that. Maybe you're in a state of aninos. That's why you didn't eat it. I'm the Kohen Gadol. I can eat even in aninos. Moshe says, okay, so then why did you burn it? Amrlo, listen to this. Vatikra'ena osi ka'ela va'achalti chatas hayom hayitav be'enei Hashem. So Aaron says to Moshe, after these events occurred to me today, which events? Ultimately, again, the death of my children. I am in a state of aninos. Do you think it would be appropriate for me to eat this chatos in the eyes of Hashem? So Aaron says back to Moshe, I don't think it's appropriate for me to eat this. Now, why not? Shema lo shamata ela b'kodshe sha'a. Moshe, perhaps when you heard from Hashem that I'm supposed to eat karbanos even in a state of aninos, maybe that's only kodshe sha'a. Kodshe sha'a, remember again, means what? Those karbanos that are unique for now, not future karbanos. Di'iba kodesh, because if you think that I should be eating karbanos in a state of aninos, even for future generation karbanos, in other words, for future karbanos, in other words, for karbanos that apply throughout all time, kal v'chomer ma'aser akal, I can make a kal v'chomer from ma'aser sheni. Uma ma'aser akal omer Torah lo achalti ba'oni mimenu. Back right, b'kodshe doros l'kol shekain. So I will say, you're not allowed to eat ma'aser sheni in a state of aninos. Right, now, ma'aser sheni, I will say, out of all like the consecrated items, is considered to be the most lenient. So if you can't eat ma'aser sheni in a state of aninos, then certainly, again, you can't eat kodshe doros. So we'll say, here's the stats. So essentially, Aaron says back to Moshe, is it possible that you heard a little bit differently from Hashem? And is it possible that when you heard that I am supposed to eat in a state of aninos, that only applies to Kadshe Sha'ah, unique episodic karbanos for now? But for Kadshe Doros, for karbanos that are going to be offered up for future generations, you don't eat in a state of aninos. Rather, what do with it? You offer it and you burn it, which is why Aaron, burnt the Seir of Rosh Chodesh, because the Seir of Rosh Chodesh is opposed to the other two, the Seir of Nachshon ben Aminadav, and the inaugural Seir, the Seir of Rosh Chodesh, is Kadshe Doros, and therefore, again, I'm not going to eat that, versus the other ones, the Seir of Nachshon ben Aminadav, the inaugural Seir, those are Kadshe Shah, and I will eat it. So let's get ready for this. Miyad, this is such a beautiful Gemara. Miyad, Vayishma Moshe Vayitav Be'enav. Moshe Rabbeinu heard this. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Aaron, you're right. Hoda v'lo bosh Moshe lomar lo shamati, ela shamati v'shachachti. Right? This will say what happened. Moshe Rabbeinu could have easily said, Aaron, I don't know, I never heard that from God, but that makes a lot of sense. Right? And we'll say no one would have ever known what Moshe Rabbeinu heard or didn't hear from God. But instead, Moshe Rabbeinu was humble and honest, and he said, you're right. Aaron, you're right. That is what I heard, and I forgot. That is what I heard, and I forgot. So we'll say, so just like a tremendous exchange between the brothers. So we'll say, so first of all, you see something really amazing over here. This is the recipe for how brothers get along, right? Part number one, someone does something and you don't understand it, ask. Don't attack. So often in life, I will say, someone does something I don't like, and what do? Boom, I attack. I'm out of the gate, and I attack. Nothing positive ever happens when you attack someone. You don't understand why someone did something? Ask. You're always entitled to ask, hey, Aaron, I don't understand what you did. Can we talk it out? Did something happen with the blood? Did you maybe offer it in the wrong way? Did it go inside, outside? There's a conversation, and that enables Aaron to go ahead and explain why he did the things that he did. And then ultimately, again, Moshe Rabbeinu hears the explanation, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, Aaron, you're right. Because ultimately, again, when there's dialogue, there's also room for humility. And where there's room for humility, there's opportunity for someone to say, I was right, or I was wrong. There's only one thing that happens. When you attack someone, there's only one thing that happens when you attack someone. What happens when you attack? Everybody digs in. Because just our nature is, when I feel attacked, I'm going to get defensive. When I'm going to get defensive, suddenly, again, it's not about resolution, it's about being right. We'll say, you want to know the secret to all of Klal Yisrael's problems? Because we do this to each other all the time. I see something I don't like, I pounce, I attack. Okay, nothing positive is going to come. The way the brothers spoke to each other, this is the secret to Achdus and Klal Yisrael. We're not going to agree on everything. You see something you don't agree with, ask. But ask for the sake of understanding, not for the sake of shtaching. Yes, that is a verb, shtaching, right? And not for the sake of shtaching. And suddenly, again, where there is dialogue, there's room. There's a conversation. And how does Moshe Rabbeinu come out at the end? Aaron, you were right, and I was wrong. I forgot. Because with this dialogue, again, it opens the door for so much understanding and also humility. No one feels attacked. And when no one feels attacked, there's also an opportunity to say, I was wrong. Incredible. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon Heichim Mitartzilu. So I will say, so again, remember, this is all according to Rabbi Nehemiah. So according to Rabbi Nehemiah, ultimately, again, Aaron does not eat the Seir of Rosh Chodesh because of Aninos. And again, I will say, so again, in Rabbi Nehemiah's model, so remember, it's the Seir of Rosh Chodesh that he doesn't eat because the Seir of Rosh Chodesh is Kadshe Shah. It's Kadshe Doros, is ongoing karbanos, and ongoing karbanos are not consumed in a state of Aninos. Masha'en Kein Kadshe Shah, episodic karbanos, like the Seir of Nachshon and the inaugural Seir, are consumed. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon Heichim Mitartzilu, and Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon, they hold that the reason Aaron did not go ahead and consume the carbon was why? The Seir Rosh Chodesh was because it became tamei. So how do they understand this exchange of emotion? I'm supposed to watch this. So ultimately, again, so same conversation. Moshe says to Aaron, why did you burn the Seir Rosh Chodesh? Why did you not eat it? Shema nichnas dama lefnai v'lefnim. Same conversation. Moshe says to Aaron, maybe you took the blood inside of the Kodesh. Amar lahem lo hein lohuvas dama. Nope, didn't do that. Shema chutz l'mechitzasa yatzasa. Maybe you took it outside of the Mishkan. Amar lo hein b'kodesh haisa. No, I kept it in the Mikdash itself. The dilma ba'aninos akrivusa palsua. Maybe you offered it up in a state of aninos. That's why it's pasul. Amar lo Moshe. Hein hekrivua de paslu b'hu aninos. Moshe, who do you think offered up these karbanos? You think my sons offered it up? My sons, who are regular kohanim, enochinami, if they offered it up in a state of aninos, it would be invalid. Ani hikraftiha. I am the one who offered it up. Dilma agav mararaichu pashatu b'hu ve'tameh. They will say, watch this. Moshe says to Aaron, maybe as a result of your grief, you were not careful with the karbanos and they became tameh. Wow. Rabbi, hear this? Moshe says to Aaron, maybe you just lost 2 of your sons. You've got a lot on your mind. Maybe you just weren't attentive to the karbanos ultimately again, and therefore they became tameh. Rabbi said, get ready for this. Amar lo Moshe. He says, Moshe, this is so amazing. Kach ani be'einecha. Is that what you think of me? Shani mevazek hadshe shamayim. That I am not careful with kacheshem, with karbanos contracting tumah. Vatikrano sikaela. You think that just because I lost my children, vafilu eila ukaela ein ani mevaze kadshe shamayim. Aaron says, Moshe, is that what you think of me? That because I suffered this loss, I had a lapse of awareness? If this were to happen to me again, I still would not take my eye off the ball. I would not allow, we'll say, this to me, this, all of Shas is worth it for a Gemara like this, I will say. If we're honest with ourselves, 9.9 out of 10 times the reason we don't accomplish the things we want to accomplish in life is because we take our eye off the ball, because we are not committed enough, because we're not dedicated enough, because we allow ourselves to make so many different excuses for non-performance. That's it. There are some things we don't accomplish in life because of extenuating circumstances. But that's the miyut shebemiyut. If we're honest with ourselves, right? If we're honest with ourselves, 'tis the season for honesty, right? So I'll say, so again, if we are honest with, I think, right? If we're honest with ourselves, right? If we're honest with ourselves, we'll say, this is why, if we're not, so many of us, I can't speak for any of us, I know I'm not the person I want to be in life. And I know why it is. I could come up with a whole bunch of excuses, but they're not really valid. At the end of the day, I didn't try hard enough. I didn't work hard enough. I haven't been singularly committed to the actualization of my goals, because the goal is to be an Aaron. Aaron says to Moshe, you think that I would take my eye off the ball because I suffered these losses? I could have these losses and more losses, and I would never lose sight of who I am, of what I am, and what I need to accomplish. Osai, is it not the most overwhelming thing you've heard in life? You can make a whole bunch of excuses for yourself. At the end of the day, most of them really don't hold water. We have to be an Aaron HaKohen, having that singular commitment. Nothing gets in my way from accomplishing anything as I want to accomplish. Amar lo, v'i lehein lo huvas dama b'kodesh haisa, achol tachanasa b'kodesh karsheti esi, parinas yachlua. So ultimately, Moshe says, I don't understand. If that's the case, Aaron, if that's the case, that you didn't take the blood inside, you didn't take the blood outside, right? Ultimately, you had no lapse of awareness. Then why did you burn the Siyar Rosh Chodesh? Why didn't you eat it? The Gemara says, listen to this. Amar lo, shema lo shamata ela balayla. So ultimately, again, so Aaron says to Moshe, are you sure that you heard that I'm supposed to eat kadshe doros, right? Future karbanos during the day of Aninos? Maybe you heard that only I'm supposed to eat it at night, right? In other words, not on the day of Aninos, but on the night following Aninos. The bayom, because if you think I'm supposed to eat it by day, kal v'chomer ma'aser hakal. I can make a kal v'chomer for ma'aser sheni. Umam ma'aser hakal amar Torah lo achalti boni mimenu kodesh chamer lo kol shekain. Again, here's the problem: you're not allowed to eat the ma'aser sheni in a state of Aninos. If you can't eat ma'aser sheni in a state of Aninos, how can you eat karbanos? So in this exchange, what I was telling Moshe is yes. I am supposed to eat in a state of aninos, but maybe not by day, maybe only in the night following aninos. So what happened? The said, Miyad, Vayishma Moshe Amadeis, Vayitav Be'enav. Moshe Rabbeinu heard what Aaron said, and he said, yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right. Lo bosh Moshe Lomar lo shamati, ala shamati ushachachti. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Aaron, he could have said to Aaron, you know, oh, that's interesting. I never heard that. Instead, he was humble and he said, you know what? I did hear that, but I forgot. So the Gemara says, so the ultimate again, so we'll say, so what happened? And according to this version, Aaron was going to eat this Seir Rosh Chodesh. When was he going to eat it? That night. So what happened? So the Gemara says, Tuma ba'ones basa. What ended up happening was, so we'll say it's incredible. So what ended up happening was, Aaron, so here's what our Aaron Cheshbon. Kadshe Sha'ah, unique episodic karbanos. Aaron understood that he was going to eat now, even in a state of aninos on that day, but Kadshe Doros, he was going to eat that night. So therefore, they offered and they ate the Seir of Nachshon. They offered and they ate the inaugural Seir. They offered the Seir Rosh Chodesh, and they set aside the meat to eat that night. Meanwhile, what happened in the interim? The carbon became tamei. That's what happened in the interim. The carbon became tamei, and they just weren't able to eat it. So the Gemara says, Bishtam the Rabbanon, Hainu Dichsiv Hayom. So according to the Rabbanon, it makes sense why the pasuk says Hayom, El Reb Nechemia, my Hayom. According to Reb Nechemia, what's the meaning of the word Hayom? Chovasiyom means the obligation of the day. Bishtal Reb Nechemia, Hainu Dichsiv Hein Hayom, El Rabbanon, my Hein Hayom. According to Reb Nechemia, makes sense why the pasuk says Hein Hayom. Right? These events happened to me today. El Rabbanon, my Hein Hayom. Hachikamar, this is what it means to say. Hein Ikrivu, did my sons offer it up? Ani Hikrafti, they didn't offer it, I offered it. Amar Mar, Hayu L'shloshtan Sheyisrafu. So we'll say, so remember again, now we're going back. So we'll say, so now, interestingly enough, we have two different versions about what happened. Now again, actually, I take it back. Everyone agrees with what happened. What happened? Aaron offered up 3 Seirim. Again, the Seir of Rosh Chodesh, the Seir of Nachshon ben Aminadav, and the inaugural Seir. 2 out of those 3, the Seir of Nachshon and the inaugural Seir, with what we call Kadshe Shah, were unique karbanos for that day. One of those karbanos, the Seir of Rosh Chodesh, is what we call Kadshe Doros. That wasn't unique to that day. That's offered up every single Rosh Chodesh. Here's what we know happened. Aaron offered and ate the Seir of Nachshon ben Aminadav and the inaugural Seir, and they burnt the Seir of Rosh Chodesh. That is what occurred. There's a machlokes now. Why did he burn the Seir of Rosh Chodesh? According to the first opinion, Aaron understood that the dispensation for Aninos was only for Kadshe Shah, not for Kadshe Doros. The other opinion says that ultimately, again, for same type of distinction, but Aaron's plan was to eat the Seir of Rosh Chodesh that night. He understood that, again, the dispensation for consumption during Aninos was only for Kadshe Shah, not for Kadshe Doros. But before he got to eat the Seir, it became Tamei, and therefore he burnt it. Okay, so the Gemara says, Amar Mar, so we'll say, so now the Gemara quotes from the Brisa before, Amar Mar, Hayu l'shloshtan she'yisrfu. In reality, if you hold that it's a din and aninos, then all 3 should have really been burned. So the Gemara says, now the Gemara says, by the way, we've never said this explicitly, we just saw it in Rashi. What were the 3 karbanos that were offered that day? The Sanya, because we learned, Ve'es Sira Chatos, Darash Moshe. So we'll say, so remember again, so the Sira Chatos, Moshe Rabbeinu inquired about. So the Gemara says, Seir, what does Seir refer to? Zu Seir Nachshon. That refers to the Seir of Nachshon ben Aminadav, which was again the offering of the tribal prince of that day. Chatos, what was the Chatos? Zu Chatos Shmini. This refers again, I will say, to the unique Seir, the unique Chatos that was offered up for the day of inauguration. Darash, Moshe Rabbeinu inquired about, that Seir Shal Rosh Chodesh. That refers ultimately again to the Seir Rosh Chodesh. Yachol Shloshtan Nisrafu. You might have thought that all 3 of them were burnt. Talmud Lomar, V'hinei Soraf. Moshe Rabbeinu saw that one of them was burnt. Echad Nisraf, V'lo Shloshtan Nisrafu. Only one of them was burnt, but ultimately again the other 2 were not. Remember again, so it was the Seir Rosh Chodesh that was fully burnt, but the other 2 were not. Darash, or Darosh Darash. So literally again, I will say, which means he inquired. Shtei Drishos Lama. Why were there 2 inquiries? So also listen to this. So really, because there are 2 questions over here. Amar Lahu, Mipnei ma chatos zu nisrafa ve'elo munachos. So what Moshe Rabbeinu didn't understand was, Aaron, why did you burn the seer of Rosh Chodesh, but yet you left the other two? What's the pshat? So the Gemara says, ve'ini yodea ezu. Now, interestingly enough, from the inquiry of Moshe, here's what we know: that Aaron did not burn one of them, and he burnt one of them, and the other two were not burnt. From the inquiry of Moshe, we don't know which two were left and which one was burnt. But then Moshe Rabbeinu says to Aaron, the carbon was given to you to atone for the congregation. Ultimately, again, then I understand that it was a Seir Rosh Chodesh. Shapir Kamrile. So I'll say, so now remember, we'll say this goes back, actually, if you remember again, to the beginning of Maseches Shavuos. Again, Rabbi say, remember again, the Seir Rosh Chodesh, which is a chatas, a sin offering. What does it atone for? Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, right? Any accidental or inadvertent transgressions of Tumah in the Beis HaMikdash. Either again, you came into the Mikdash to Tumah, you did some kind of carbon with Tumah. So once Moshe Rabbeinu says that, Aaron, you burnt this carbon that was given to atone for the congregation, which is the carbon that is given to atone for the Klal, ultimately, again, that's the Seir Rosh Chodesh. Okay? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Nechemia Tamei Da'amar, Kadshe lo paslu bo aninos. And I will say, ultimately, Rabbi Nechemia is of the opinion, he says, Kadshe unique episodic karbanos can be consumed even in a state of aninos. So therefore, again, I will say, because again, remember what's happening, and everyone is agreeing with that. Everyone is, because remember, again, Aaron properly offered up two karbanos, the seer of Nachshon and Aminadav, and the inaugural seer were normally offered. Even though Aaron was in a state of aninos, it was only the seer of Rosh Chodesh, ultimately, again, that was not offered up. Amar hayilo la'achla la'erev. So as I said, we said before, the Gemara said before, why didn't they just eat the seer of Rosh Chodesh at night? Granted, you can't eat it by day, but why can't you go and eat it by night? So the Gemara says, Shapir Kamilei, Kasavar Aninos Laila Doraisa. This opinion must have held that Halacha L'maisa, the Aninos of the nighttime Aninos is Doraisa. Supposed to this circles back to the previous sugya as well. That not only is the Aninos of the day of death Doraisa, but Aninos of the night that follows the day of death is also Doraisa. Therefore, waiting till that night ultimately doesn't do anything. The other possibility is, Pinchas haya imayin. They'll say, what about the fact that Pinchas was there? And Pinchas was also a Kohen. So remember, and Pinchas was not in a state of Aninos, because remember again, Pinchas was the son of Elazar. Right? Pinchas was Aaron's grandson. Pinchas' father was still alive, which means Pinchas was not in a state of Aninos. So why not allow Pinchas to eat the karbanos? Savarla Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Chanina, it's incredible. Lo niskain Pinchas at shehargul Zimri. This is fascinating. Pinchas wasn't a Kohen yet, right? And again, remember originally, and this is actually quite fascinating, the kahuna was given over to Aaron and his sons, right? Interestingly enough, Pinchas actually does not become the Kohen until when? It does not become a Kohen until after he kills Zimri, right? Zimri and Cosby. Remember again, I will say this is after there was like this widespread immorality between the Jews, between the Jewish men and the daughters of Midyan, and Pinchas goes ahead and engages in an act of religious zealotry and goes ahead and kills Zimri and Cosby. Only after that event did Pinchas become a Kohen. So amazingly enough, at the time of the death of his uncles, Nadav and Avihu, Pinchas was not a Kohen. Because he wasn't a Kohen, therefore Allah said there was no one else to consume the karbanos but Aaron and his remaining sons. So the Gemara says, Dichsiv, v'hai salo ulezaro acharav, bris kuhunas olam. As the pasuk says again, when does Pinchas become a Kohen? After again he kills Zimri and Cosby, and then it says it will be to him and to his offspring an everlasting covenant of the kahuna. Ravashi says, Ravashi Amar Ad Shesam Shalom Ben Ashvatim. Though in fact, interestingly enough, when does Pinchas become a Kohen? Only once he made peace between the tribes. Now, when was that? Shneimar Vayishma Pinchas HaKohen Nesiya Eidav Rashi Alpha Yisrael. Shabbos says it's actually quite interesting. So this is an episode in in Yoshua, the Navi Yoshua. If you take a quick look at Rashi, what does it mean that he made peace between the Shvatim? If you take a look at Rashi, this is the first wide line of Rashi. Rashi says, Shesam Shalom ben Shvatim b'mei Yehoshua v'shevet b'nei Gad u'b'nei Ruvain shabanu as hamizbeach be'ever hayardim. So we'll say, so this is actually quite fascinating. So remember again, Gad and Ruvain and half of the tribe of Manasseh settled on the other side of the Jordan River. So the Navi records a story where they made a mizbeach, they made an altar. Now, interestingly enough, the rest of Klal Yisrael got very upset because they thought it was an altar for Avodah Zarah. So what happened? They massed the army and they were going to go to war against Gad and Bnei Ruvain. Now what happened? Pinchas goes ahead and dispatches a message that says, "Hey Chevra, what are you doing?" They say, "Hold up. It's not an altar for idolatry. It's an altar for HaKadosh Baruch Hu." Pinchas quickly de-escalated the situation and averted war. So the Gemara says it was only after Pinchas made shalom between the Shvatim that he was made the Kohen. See, either way, the point the Gemara is making over here is at the time of Parashat Shmini, the time of the death of Nadav and Avihu, Pinchas was not a Kohen. Because he was not a Kohen, therefore, again, what the Gemara mentioned before, that hey, even if Aaron is in Aninos, let Pinchas eat the karbanos, that is not a valid approach. Incredible. The Gemara says, the Gemara says, but what about the fact? So what is the so just as an aside, an interesting machlokes as to when does Pinchas actually receive the mantle of the kahuna. One opinion says after he killed Zimri and Cosby. Other opinion says after he made peace between the Shvatim. So what does that opinion say? What about the fact that it says that after Pinchas killed Zimri and Cosby, it says that it'll be for him and his descendants an everlasting covenant of the Kuna. That actually is talking about, again, that pasuk is not Kivim Kuna. Rather, again, that pasuk is ultimately telling you that he's going to have bracha. Right? That ultimately, when Pinchas gets the kahuna, ultimately his offspring are going to be Kohanim Gedolim. V'idach nami haksiv vayishma Pinchas HaKohen. So the Gemara says, what about the other opinion that says, right? What about the other opinion? What does it do with the pasuk that says, Vayishma Pinchas HaKohen? Hahu liyachis zaro acharav. Ultimately, again, that's to say that halacha l'maisa, he's going to have very bakavad. His offspring are going to be kohanim gidolim. Ultimately, again, it's to give proper yichus. Okay, so we'll say. So bottom line is that halacha l'maisa. Either way, Pinchas was not yet a Kohen at the time of the death of Nadav and Avihu, and therefore halacha l'maisa, there was no one else to go ahead and eat the karbanos except for Aaron and his sons. So Rabbi will say, just to kind of solidify. Say here's what happened over here, right? Day of the inauguration of the Mishkan, Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu, die. That we know. What happened exactly? So now here's what else we know. 3 karbanos offered up that day. 3 seirim. 1, the Seir of Rosh Chodesh. That's what we call Kadshe Doros. That wasn't unique to that day. That is always going to be offered up. Karban number 2, Seir of Nachshon ben Aminadab, Seir of the tribal prince. Karban number 3, the special inaugural Seir. Here's what we know. 2 of them, the Seir of Nachshon and the Seir ultimately again of the inauguration, were offered up normally. Seir of Rosh Chodesh was fully burnt, not consumed. Moshe confronts Aaron, why did you not eat the Seir of Rosh Chodesh? 2 different versions as to what happened. Version number 1 is that Aaron said to Moshe, I'm a Kohen, and I could offer and eat in a state of Aninos, but only Kadshe Sha'ah, not Kadshe Doros. Okay? Version number 2 is I can go ahead and eat for future generations. I could offer and eat, but ultimately I could offer, but I'm only going to eat Kadshe Doros at night. So therefore, again, the Seir of Rosh Chodesh was Kadshe Doros. He was going to save to eat that night. What happened in between the time that he offered it and that night? It became Tameh. It became Tameh. So 2 different dramatic versions, ultimately, again, about what happened with Aaron HaKohen. We'll say just a little bit weiter, then we'll stop. Amar Rav, we'll say, get ready for this. Moshe Rabbeinu, Kohen Gadol. The Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu actually, before the inauguration of Aaron on the 8th day, Moshe Rabbeinu actually operated as the Kohen Gadol. The Cholik B'Kadshe Shemayim Haya. And Moshe Rabbeinu actually, again, received a Chelek, ultimately, again, in Karbanos Shene'emar, Me'el HaMiluim LaMoshe Haya L'mano. So we'll say, this is incredible. So before, remember, on day number 8, when Aaron was officially inaugurated as the Kohen Gadol, for the previous 7 days, Moshe Rabbeinu functioned as the Kohen Gadol. Meisvei, the Gemara says, so the Gemara said before, and the Gemara asked, why did Aaron have to eat the karbanos? Let Pinchas was a Kohen, he was there. But if it's true that Moshe Rabbeinu was really a Kohen Gadol, then Isa, lema v'halo Moshe Rabbeinu ha'iman. Let it, the Gemara say that Moshe Rabbeinu was with them. Dilma, shiny Moshe detar b'shchina. They both say this is incredible. Even if Moshe Rabbeinu did function as the Kohen Gadol, at the end of the day, he would not have eaten karbanos. Why not? Because he was busy with the Shechina. He was busy with the Shechina. What does this mean? The Gemara says, "Da Amar Mar Moshe b'hashkama Allah u'b'hashkama yarat." Because we will say, now this is actually referring ultimately to Har Sinai, that Moshe Rabbeinu went up on the mountain very early in the morning, and he came down from the mountain very early in the morning, which means that I will say, Moshe Rabbeinu's preoccupation with the Shekhinah was ultimately, again, from early in the morning until late at night. And so that even if Moshe Rabbeinu was functioning as the Kohen Gadol, at the end of the day, that was not his primary avoda. His primary avoda ultimately, again, was with the Shekhinah, which I will say is something so incredibly profound as well. What does this show you? What's the Musar Haskell in this? That even in the world of spirituality, there has to be a hierarchy to the things that you're devoting your time to. No person has time for everything. And even in the realm of spirituality, there are many important things. Moshe Rabbeinu might have been functioning as the Kohen Gadol, but yet with all of that, consumption of karbanos was not something that he was going to spend his time with. Why? Because he was primarily occupied ultimately with speaking with the Shekhinah. And I will say, a tremendous Musar Haskell for us also. There's a limited amount of time, there's a limited amount of koach. There's many beautiful spiritual things to do. But a person needs a spiritual plan, and a person needs a spiritual direction. What am I going to spend my time on in order to get me where I need to get to in life? See, even Moshe Rabbeinu, he's a Kohen Gadol, eat the karbanos. Good, that's important, that's beautiful, that's holy. But I have a different mission. My mission ultimately is to speak with the Shekhinah. Even Moshe Rabbeinu can't do everything, and therefore prioritizes speaking with the Shekhinah over operating with the karbanos. Again, creates that hierarchy, creates that plan. True for Moshe Rabbeinu, true for us. So I will say, well, let's stop over here for today. Again, there's more about tomorrow's sugya is much more about Moshe Rabbeinu and his functioning as a Kohen Gadol. Again, what I still owe you is how Aninos ultimately again works, how Aninos is going to work ultimately again with Karbanos. To be continued, Bosai, Shkoyach. All right, everyone, Zoom, have a great day, everyone.